Well, the NFL preseason is now over. Final rosters are being set, which means that it's time for our panel of experts to give predictions that everyone will laugh about around this time next year. That's right. We welcome to the NFC West Huddle. I'm Aaron Levine in Seattle, joined by Richard Sines in Phoenix, Keyshawn Ward in San Francisco, and in Los Angeles, it's Ryan Dyrud from the LAFB Network. Thanks for being here, guys. Let's start with our first topic. 53-man rosters were due earlier this week. They're continuing to evolve as we approach the openers. But give me the biggest roster surprise on your team this year, either an unexpected player making the team or being cut, or a significant waiver signing. Richard, we'll start with you.
Yeah, the Arizona Cardinals going with running back Bam Knight. That was a big surprise, and he kind of burst onto the scene, had a long touchdown run in the final preseason game against the Raiders, and then you see, whoa, this guy's got some speed, right? He's got that home run type of speed that could take it to the house anytime he gets the ball. So he makes the team, and then a corresponding move is two running backs don't make the team, and DJ Dallas and Michael Carter, two guys that have experience in the NFL. DJ Dallas was a Pro Bowler last year on special teams. He took a kickoff to the house last year for the Arizona Cardinals, and now he's off the team. Well, he ends up with Carolina. He got picked up, but that was still interesting to see him not make the Cardinals 53-man roster. Michael Carter was a guy that has experience. He's now on the practice squad, so Bam Knight was the big surprise here for the Arizona Cardinals. And Clayton Tune, also a quarterback that did well, he got cut, didn't make the 53-man roster, but he's on the practice squad as well. So the Cardinals keeping just two quarterbacks.
Keyshawn, you're next. What was the biggest roster surprise for the 49ers?
Aaron, the biggest surprise to me was probably Sebastian Valdez being waived by the Niners. Now, granted, he got brought back to the practice squad, but he earned a nickname throughout training camp, being called the Hulk. He was pretty much disruptive throughout the entire training camp. I mean, he tallied 6 tackles, a half a sack, and he's very disruptive for all quarterbacks throughout each preseason game. And he also kind of became a fan favorite, so I didn't expect him to not make the 53-man roster. I thought he'd be, a part of the rotation, with Alfred Collins, C.J. West, and the rest of the boys in the interior. So I thought he would just, make the roster. But other than that, on offense, I expected Jeff Wilson to make the team, but it kind of makes sense now. The fact that they traded for Brian Robinson, Yariel Gruendo as a third-string running back. So the running back room is pretty much deep, but I thought Wilson played pretty well for the Niners throughout training camp and preseason, but now he's back with the Miami Dolphins.
By the way, is it just me, or were you excited about Robbie Chosen this offseason, and then he got cut? Am I imagining things?
Oh, my God. That's another one. I mean, he did pretty well his last game against the Chargers. He dropped I think a pass against the Raiders or the Chargers. Can't remember which game it was, but he performed pretty well. Now, I don't think him being on the practice squad is going to be something that's going to be long term. I guarantee you he's going to be in that starting room probably come week 1 against Seattle.
Okay, well, we will keep an eye on that. Up next to Ryan in Los Angeles, what was the Rams' biggest roster surprise?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, gentlemen, great to see you as always. I'm battling a cold, so if I hack up a lung mid-sentence, I do apologize. But the big move that made waves here in L.A. was the Rams deciding to waive their 5th-round pick, Chris Paul Jr., out of Ole Miss. He was a draft pick just this year, like I said, the 5th round, a guy that was in a leadership position, came to L.A., looked to make an impact immediately on special teams and actually potentially start for the Rams at linebacker. They had a pretty wide open position. They end up waiving him. He signs with the Seattle Seahawks practice squad, or should I say the Seattle Rams, who just happen to have so many of this Rams team up in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And I think what made it the most surprising here is, yes, you have a guy like Sean Dolak, who they also signed as a UDFA, who really just pushed him in camp and really earned a spot on this roster. But a guy like Troy Reeder, who's been in this league for a long time, he's a veteran. He's not going to start. It's going to be Nate Landman. It's going to be Omar Spates. So they could have waived Troy Reeder as a veteran. He would not go to waivers, and they could have immediately added him to their practice squad. Instead, they waived the rookie, and then he ends up signing with the Seattle Seahawks. So a bit of a head-scratcher. We'll see if it bites them in the butt, but they seem to be real happy with the room they have, keeping 4.
And as for the Seattle Rams, as you mentioned, if you can't beat them, join them. So that's why we are grabbing all of the Rams we possibly can.
Aaron.
Yeah.
Let me say something real quick to Ryan. Ryan, how do you not mention Tanner Ingle. Did you watch that Cleveland Browns game? Oh, my God, he put out like 3 Browns in 1 quarter. I mean, that safety from North Carolina State, I know he's on your practice squad, but, man, I thought he'll make the 53-man roster. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's a good point, Keyshawn. He had a great game. McVay was actually on the broadcast talking to the reporters when he had a couple big hits and was just like, oh, man, Ingle does that every day in practice. So a little surprising. They were just really deep at DB, and they were able to get him over the practice squad.
Yeah.
Well, as for the
Aaron, now I want to say something to Keyshawn, if I could. Keyshawn, how do you let somebody take your nickname, the Hulk, on the 49ers? I thought when it came to the Hulk, you were the Hulk in San Francisco with the schmediums that you wear to show off the bike. I'm like, when I heard somebody else was named the Hulk, I'm like, wait a minute, that's the biggest surprise right there.
Hey, Richard, he earned it on the field. I'm doing the weight room, so it's a little different. I got to give him that.
I can't wait to see him
you're humble. I
interview
get
him
it.
one-on-one. You get the Hulk interviewing the Hulk. As for the Seahawks,
exactly.
if you've been watching the show, not a huge surprise, but it would have been a surprise back in March. Rookie receiver Torrey Horton basically winning the number 3 receiver role, which made Marquez Valdez-Scantling dispensable. Fairly surprising from the outside, at least, that the Seahawks cut MVS given since they gave him $3 million guaranteed this offseason, but it was just a 1-year deal. It looks like his connection to Clint Kubiak from New Orleans last season was not strong enough. He was not overly effective during the preseason. We wish him nothing but drop balls and ineptitude when he's with the 49ers now, especially in week 1. But again, we've been talking about it for the last month or so. Torrey Horton won this job more than MVS lost this job. Horton's shown his potential as second-round talent that dropped to the 5th round in last year's draft because of a bad injury last year. Also, a little surprised to see the Seahawks releasing Shaquille Griffin after they claimed Darian Kendrick from the Rams off of waivers. Glad to see Griffin back with the practice squad. And clearly this is a calculated risk for Seattle to add a younger cornerback to their roster with potentially higher upside. So we're excited to see if Kendrick finds a role on this defense as well. Up next, what is your overall takeaway from the preseason? Keyshawn, we'll start with you. What are the vibes like down in Santa Clara right now?
Well, when it comes to the kicking game, the vibes are not good. I mean, Aaron, each week in the preseason, you go on Twitter or X or just the fans in the stands at Levi Stadium, they are just holding their breath every time Jake Moody comes out to come kick a field goal. Now, he quieted down the noise after that Raiders game, making that game winner for 59 yards. But other than that, man, the consistency is not there. Now, John Lynch did say it's kind of surprising to him because, Moody won them a game against the Raiders, but how long is that going to be sustained throughout the season? I mean, against the Chargers, even him kicking off when it went out of bounds, you can see Kyle Shannon's face. He was just despising Moody in that moment. And it really taught me a lesson about the NFL. I mean, I truly believe that Moody probably would not be on this roster if he was not drafted 3rd round. And I know, the GM and head coach, they want to look right with their draft picks, so you don't want to let go Moody. I mean, that's kind of why they let Greg Jussel go earlier in training camp, because if it's, neck and neck, they're going to go with the guy that was drafted by them higher in the draft round. So that is no good vibes right now when it comes to Niners in the kicking game. Now, on offense, the Brock Purdy and Ricky Pearsall connection is looking real natural. I mean, when against that Raiders defense, it was only for 1 series, but it seemed like every time Purdy was in trouble, he found Ricky Pearsall downfield. And last year, he was in and out of the lineup, so they couldn't really build that chemistry. But now it's coming up on display on the field this season. And on defense, I've been talking about him every week when we do this show. Marquise Siegel. He may not be starting, come week 1 because of Pinnock and Jair Brown, but, man, he really, stepped up to the plate and showed that he could be a player in his defense with his open field tackle, range from side to side or hash to hash. I think Siegel's will be a really good player in his defense, throughout the season. So those are the big takeaways for me for the Niners in training camp and preseason overall.
Okay, Ryan, you're next. I'm assuming there's still concern about Matthew Stafford in Los Angeles. What can you say about that, and then your overall takeaway from the preseason?
Yeah, well, first, there's no concern about the kicking game since we went up to the Bay Area and got our kicker from Stanford and Josh Carter, and he's been looking good for the Rams. So, Niners could have had that potentially. But Stafford, there's obviously concern. It's a day-to-day thing. Since he started practicing last week, he's practiced every single day in full. He's been full go. He's felt good, no limitations. So all of the conversation, the vibes from McVay, from him, from the offense, from Mike LaFleur, the offensive coordinator, is, hey, he looks as good as he's ever looked. He's ready to go for week 1. The big question is going to be is when he takes that first hit obviously he has not been touched. He's probably not even been breathed on in practice. So when he inevitably gets that first hit in week 1, going up against Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter for the Houston Texans, how does he respond? How does the back respond and look after that? So that's definitely what we'll look for. But as of now, vibes are good there. I'd say the other big takeaway, as we've talked about many times on this show, the Rams play 0 starters, so hard to put a lot of stock in that. But the depth from the pass rush on defense is for real. We've seen some of the starters in some of these joint practices, and Jared Verse and Byron Young, they look just as good as they did last year. But when you look at some of these backups in Josiah Stewart, Nick Hampton, Desjuan Johnson, they have a lot of talent and depth that can get after the quarterback. And when you can have that in spades and come in waves, rep after rep after rep, you're just going to wear guys down. And lastly, on the defensive line, their addition from this offseason, Poona Ford, just from across town from the Chargers, is the real deal in run defense. It was their weakest part of the defense last year. Saquon Barkley and the Eagles carved them up in that divisional game in the playoffs. They could not stop a nosebleed in the run game, and Poona Ford will be a huge addition to doing that. So we didn't see it in necessarily the preseason games, but we did see it in the preseason practices and training camp and in joint practices. So those are probably the biggest takeaways there.
So I will go next. My overall takeaway from the preseason is that there is a ton of optimism from the Seahawks fan base, likely more than there normally would be from even the skeptics, and still very little buy-in from the overall betting markets. I continued to be shocked that the Seahawks are not only 5-1 to win this division, but have the worst odds among the 4 teams to do so. Now, I understand that preseason football doesn't tell you a whole lot about how the actual season will pan out, but the small sample set of what we have seen from the first-string offense, and specifically this offensive line in this new system under Clint Kubiak, really has me bullish about their chances. It's a huge difference maker between a first-time coordinator who was relying way too much on the passing game last season and consistently leaving his linemen on an island in one-on-one situations, and this year bringing in a coordinator who's been around NFL football his entire life and is committed to running the football in a zone blocking scheme that is as refreshing as it seems to be effective. Running the football, a non-negotiable in the Seahawks offense this season, and it's only going to make Sam Darnold's life easier. You marry that with a top 5 defense, and you've got a contender. So I'm going to give Colin Cowherd props for being one of the only loudmouths out there in America that actually understands this, because it seems like the rest of the world continues to doubt them. I say let them doubt Seattle, just like they doubted Cal Raleigh's chances at AL MVP back in May. We know something that everyone else doesn't, and eventually I think people are going to see the light also. So that's the perfect time to get back to Richard now, who continues to think my takes are a little over the top. What are your overall takeaways from the Cardinals after training camp in the preseason?
First of all, I never doubted Seattle. I just doubted Geno. I doubted your guy, the guy you had a bromance with, Geno Smith, at quarterback. And now I'm really doubting Sam Darnold, where I wish I had Geno back, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think he's better than Sam Darnold. So I just doubt what you guys do at quarterback. You guys have a great defense. You guys run the ball well. I just don't know what you're thinking at quarterback. And also, I'm still surprised with Keyshawn's comment about the Hulk. I wrote it in my diary that Keyshawn was the Hulk of San Francisco. Now there's another guy over there, known as the Hulk. But as far as the Arizona Cardinals in the preseason goes, I think it was a pretty good preseason. They were pretty healthy. They didn't have any major injuries. I think Jacoby Brissett kind of showed that he could be a solid backup and could fill in for a couple games if Kyler Murray goes down. So he has some experience as a starter, and I think the defensive line was fantastic. And it's no secret, the Arizona Cardinals went all in on defense this offseason, right? Every draft pick but one was on the defensive side of the football. They went and got some key defensive free agents. Calais Campbell bringing back a blast from the past on that D-line. They also got some good corners. They got a corner in the draft in Will Johnson, the rookie out of Michigan. But Jordan Birch, the kid out of Oregon, the 3rd-round pick, the linebacker, really got after the quarterback. And that's what I liked from the preseason from the Arizona Cardinals defense, was pressure on the quarterback, because they're going to have to do that with those young corners. And the young corners got some good work in the preseason. Will Johnson, as I mentioned, started quite a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, because you know how it goes, right? You put pressure on the quarterback, it helps out the back end of the defense.
Okay, third topic. Everyone's likely going through their fantasy drafts. In fact, I'm a little distracted because I'm in the middle of one right now. Give me a sleeper fantasy pick from your team, maybe a player who could be overrated this season in most drafts. Ryan, we're going to start with you and the Rams. Who is overrated and who might be a sleeper?
Yeah, the Rams in fantasy are not the best, I guess, team to kind of go after, because since Matthew Stafford's been in LA, he's basically targeted one guy. So if you get that guy, a la Cooper Kupp in 2021, a la Puka Nacua in 2023, you were sitting pretty, but he doesn't really feed anyone else on the offense to give you much. And then Kyren Williams obviously is a very stable running back. But if I am going to pick a sleeper, I'm actually going to go with the tight end Tyler Higbee. Obviously, he's a veteran, been there forever, but he's in the final year of his contract with the team. They drafted Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon with their first pick in the draft in the second round to be the heir apparent for the position. He's not quite ready yet, and I anticipate Tyler Higbee to kind of leave it all out there to get one more contract, whether it's with the Rams or elsewhere in free agency. So he's going to want to have a big season, as they all do, but as the best he can in the final year. So I'd put Tyler Higbee as maybe a sleeper tight end stream play there. And a little bit overrated, I might actually go Puka Nacua. I do think the addition of Devontae Adams is going to take away from Puka Nacua's production in terms of fantasy value. Obviously, he's still a huge part of the offense in terms of just on the field, but we could see some different touchdown production. And I think Devontae Adams has already, built a good rapport with this Rams offense, with the coaching staff. They trust him in play calling, and so he's going to eat into that a little bit. I don't think we'll see like a Cooper Kupp-like season for either one of them in those fantastic years. They'll be a little bit more spread out, but I think Puka Nacua is probably a little less valuable than he was last year or the year prior.
And Puka Nacua is going in the first round of a lot of drafts, or at least at the beginning of the second round of drafts. Richard, you're next. Which Cardinals players are most people sleeping on in their fantasy drafts?
It's funny. I don't really see a sleeper for the Arizona Cardinals, right? I think it's the obvious picks, right? It's James Conner. It's, Trey McBride. I think he's going to be the best tight end in football this year. He was fantastic last year. He's had a fantastic training camp. And then, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a lot of people that, a lot of people are picking. But, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. could be overrated because a lot of people are taking him, I think, too early, even though Marvin Harrison has had a fantastic training camp. But he did that last year. He looked great, and we were saying, wow, Maserati Marv is going to be the man. And then he came out and looked like Mazda Miata Marv. So I'm not going to fall for it again. I want to see it in the regular season. I want to see it on a consistent basis. And so that's why I kind of passed on Marvin Harrison a couple times, in the draft. And I was trying to get James Conner because I think he's going to be solid once again because he's the bell cow for that Cardinals offense. But I think as far as a sleeper, maybe a guy that can emerge as that number 2 wide receiver behind Marvin Harrison, right? It's going to be Trey McBride. It's going to be Harrison. Maybe a guy like Zay Jones or Michael Wilson. But I don't really see a sleeper on the Cardinals roster unless you got to draft the defensive player and you can get a guy like Budda Baker or Mac Wilson, the linebacker, that I think is going to get a lot of tackles in this defense.
Well, you must be rubbing off on me because I'm looking at the team I just drafted, and I have Kyler Murray as my quarterback and James Conner as my running back. So you did something right. Not necessarily what you just said, but just, I guess, over the entire offseason. It's somewhere in the back of my brain, and I'm just doing it subliminally. As
my
for the
plan
Seahawks,
is working.
You are. It is absolutely working. I have 2 sleeper picks. First, it's Zach Charbonnet, simply because I think he's a better running back fit for this offense. He's also been more available than Ken Walker has this preseason. This is only speculation on my part, but I've sensed a bit of frustration with this coaching staff about Walker's availability during training camp. He's been nursing a minor foot issue, but you have to wonder, especially since this is a contract year for Walker, how bad that issue actually is and whether he's just trying to save himself for the regular season. I don't think that bodes well for Walker, who is probably a little overvalued in fantasy drafts right now, and that makes Charbonnet a little undervalued. My other sleeper pick would be tight end A.J. Barner, and this would be for a 12 or 14 team league where you have to go a little deeper than other drafts. Barner currently ranked as the 52nd best tight end, well behind rookie Elijah Arroyo, who is ranked 31st. I think they have that completely backwards. Barner had 4 touchdowns last season, and he's only going to get better this season, especially in the red zone. He's proven to be a reliable target down there, so I think Barner finishes this season with 5 or 6 touchdowns. He's a great bye-week tight end to have on your roster. How about you, Keyshawn? Give me some Niners players to keep in mind for my fantasy draft.
I think the biggest sleeper for the Niners probably be Ricky Pearsall. Just the fact that He's going to probably be the most targeted receiver until Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk come back into the lineup, do what they're doing with their injuries. I think Pearsall's connection with Purdy is really going to keep growing as the season goes on. And I think most defenses will be more focused on stopping Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson and then taking away George Kittle up the seam in the middle. So I think Pearsall is probably the sleeper. Now, as far as overrated, it's going to be a little bit of a hot take, but I'll go with Christian McCaffrey just because with Brian Robinson in the running back room, I would advise Kyle, just hear me out. If Shanahan's smart, you do not want to give McCaffrey all these carries like he did last year, running into the ground and losing for the season. You want to think about the long game. Kind of share the carries between him and Robinson. Even Garindo getting some touches because you want to McCaffrey being there on the deep run when he gets into deep in the playoffs and he's not, battered throughout the entire season. Yes, he get a lot of catches, get a lot of touches, but if they're smart, might want to not feed McCaffrey as much and try to give Robinson some of those carries as well.
Okay, well, up next, it's never too early to look ahead to week 1. After all, it is basically game week already. I'm asking everyone what stands out to you about the regular season opener for your team, and I'm going to start here. I'm just going to go back to the overall betting markets, simply not seeing what we're seeing in Seattle. The Seahawks are now 2.5-point underdogs at home. That means they would be 8.5-point underdogs if this game was in Santa Clara, and to me, that's ridiculous. The Niners have too many questions defensively right now, and they are so thin at receiver that they're picking up Seahawks leftovers. I understand that they're the division favorites right now, the Niners are, but that's only because their schedule is softer than the Pillsbury Doughboy. I don't think it's going to be a blowout next week, but I do see the Seahawks winning the opener by a touchdown. Remember, the reason Mike McDonald was hired originally was to handle the likes of Kyle Shanahan and to handle Sean McVay. I go back to the Niners game in Baltimore 2 years ago when Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions against McDonald's defense. Now that the Seahawks defense has a full year under McDonald and a better understanding of all of those moving parts, I think that's a recipe for success against Purdy and company, especially when they're playing here in Seattle. Keyshawn, since the Seahawks are facing the Niners, you go next. What's your first impression of this matchup?
Well, Aaron, I don't know if you should talk too much crap about MVS. He might score on y'all week 1. Just saying. I mean, he's a deep threat down the field. He might drop, might catch it, but he will burn somebody on that defense. But no, in all seriousness, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Niners pretty much have their way when it comes to Seattle. I mean, on Thursday Night Football, on Thanksgiving a couple years ago, the Niners just pretty much have their way. It's like that Levi Stadium. It's like, what is it a road game? The Niners pretty much do what they want with Seattle when they play against them as of late. And then also, I think that Sam Darnold might get a little bit exposed against that Niners defense, especially with the core pieces, Nick Bosa and Fred Warner healthy and Lenore on the outside. Watch out, Aaron. It's going to be a long day for Sam Darnold week 1.
Yeah, neutralize those guys with a running game that wasn't there a season ago. That's my story. I'm going to stick to it, and we will see in just a little week's time or so. Richard, you're next. The Cardinals are favorites on the road at the Saints. What's your initial take on that game?
First of all, I just want to say I love this rivalry between you and Keyshawn here. For once, I'm not the drama. Right? Usually it's like, am I the drama? Not this time. I kind of agree with Keyshawn there. I think I wrote it in my diary. I think this is what you're going to be saying, Aaron. You're going to say, come back, Gino. You don't want Gino back after you see what happens with Sam Darnold. So it's going to be interesting to see how things work out for you guys. Like I said, you guys got a good defense, good running game, good head coach. But quarterback, once again, an issue for the Seattle Seahawks. We'll see. Maybe you guys catch lightning in a bottle like Minnesota did last year. As far as the Arizona Cardinals, I'm going to talk quarterback there, too, because the Cardinals are going to face a young quarterback. We knew it was going to be either Tyler Shuck, a rookie, or Spencer Rattler, a second-year guy, another young quarterback. Spencer Rattler has been named the starter, which kind of makes sense since he has a little bit more experience. He's a local guy. He's from here, from Pinnacle High, so that's going to be interesting to watch him go up against the hometown team. And I think it's interesting. You guys were talking about, Seattle being an underdog at home. The Arizona Cardinals favored on the road by almost a touchdown, 6.5 points. That just goes to show what the Vegas thinks about the Arizona Cardinals. And I think it's going to come down to their defense, putting pressure on this young quarterback, making him make mistakes, making him throw when he's not ready or be rushed to throw, and that will allow the defense to be opportunistic. And, of course, if they get an early lead, the Cardinals do, they'll give it to James Conner, ground and pound. Aaron, that'll help out your fantasy team. Doesn't help out the chimichangas because I got Christian McCaffrey, but I also got the handcuff on that too. So I think it's going to be the defense getting after the young quarterback for the Saints, getting an early lead, and then running away with it.
And in the meantime, I just drafted Josh Carty as my kicker. So there you go. Everybody is rubbing off on me right now. Ryan, the Rams host the Texans. Your first thoughts on that game?
Aaron, might as well just name your team the NFC West Bandits or something.
Exactly.
But yeah, last I checked, the Rams were a 2.5 point home favorite. So basically a coin flip against the Texans here. The biggest matchup here obviously is going to be that pass rush, primarily against left tackle. Alaric Jackson is supposed to take his first actual reps in practice this week. We'll see how that goes, how his body responds as he is still battling back from blood clots. So he has not faced any contact in the entire offseason. So if he is not a go, it will be DJ Humphries in for him most likely at left tackle. If he is a go, it could still be some of his first live reps since last season, in 6 months or so. So that's going to be huge. And then, guess what? You're protecting a quarterback that has a kind of bum back. So that's going to be a huge storyline throughout the entire game. And then bigger than that almost is how McVay is going to call this game to take some of the pressure off of that situation. Kyren Williams just got a big 3-year contract extension. Is he going to run the ball 25, 30, 35 times a game? I've talked a lot on our show over the last 3 years. If the Rams run the ball 30-plus times, they have like a 95% winning percentage, something like that. When they run under it, it drops a lot lower. So will they stick to the run to take the pressure off Stafford, not let Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson kind of pin their ears back? And we'll see how that goes. Because if it starts getting eerie there, that's where Houston, I think, can actually come away with this game.
Well, we appreciate everybody's take on that one. And we've kind of run out of time. So we had one more topic, which we will save until next week. That's going to do it for us here on the NFC West Huddle. We thank everybody for joining us from Phoenix to Los Angeles and the Bay Area as well. Next week, got a full preview of Week 1 as the regular season gets going. Also, by the way, check out all of Ryan's great coverage of the Rams on LAFBnetwork.com, and of course, all of our respective Fox websites. I want
Gino back.
As well.
Come back, Gino.
Yeah, you know what? I can only imagine Gino in this year's offense with the Seahawks, but we will never know. Instead, it is Sam Darnold. See you guys next week. Thanks so much.